Welcome to the Stoic tide. The cruelest punishment is not yelling, is not revenge. It's silence. The kind that echoes in their mind long after you've gone. When someone betrays you, they expect a reaction. A fight, a breakdown, a desperate attempt to be understood. But when you give them nothing, no anger, no words, no closure, that silence becomes the loudest consequence of all. They wanted to see you fall apart, but instead you disappeared. Not with bitterness, but with grace and that quiet withdrawal. That was the beginning of their collapse. In this video, we'll show you why your silence isn't just strength. It's strategy. It's psychological dominance. It's the invisible blade they never saw coming. Stay with us, because once you understand the silent force of Stoic revenge, you'll never need to raise your voice again. They'll destroy themselves trying to fill the void you left behind. There's a reason betrayal always comes with expectation. The one who betrayed you never thought you'd disappear quietly. They thought you'd scream, plead, break, react in ways that would validate their cruelty, because in their mind your emotional collapse would confirm their illusion of control, and your silence, that was the one response they were never prepared for. Betrayers don't just wound you. They expect to be the center of your storm. They want to see themselves reflected in your reaction, your rage, your sadness, your breakdown, not because they care, but because they needed to justify their own actions. If you fight back, they get to play the victim. If you chase them, they get to feel powerful. But if you go quiet, if you rise in silence, suddenly they're left alone with themselves. And that's where the panic begins. This is the psychological projection no one talks about. Betrayers often project their own emptiness onto you. They assume that if they cut you off or betray you, you'll collapse like they would if it happened to them. They're not analyzing your emotional intelligence. They're measuring you by their own weakness. And that's exactly why your calm shatters them. Let's be clear. Silence is not weakness. Silence is discipline, and that terrifies those who operate through chaos. Why do they expect noise from you? Because that's what they would do. Toxic people live in a constant loop of self-defense. They overtalk, over-explain, over-dramatize, not to bring clarity, but to drown the truth to them. Words are weapons and noise is a shield. So when you withdraw into stillness, you disrupt their entire psychological map. They can't read you. They can't manipulate you. They can't control what they can't understand. They're not used to boundaries. They're used to access. And the silent boundary, the one where you don't justify, don't explain, don't chase, that's the one they fear the most because it leaves them exposed. And when they can no longer distort your story, they're left face to face with their own reflection. And it's ugly. The power of psychological silence. There's a type of silence that isn't passive. It's surgical. It cuts deeper than confrontation ever could. It says, I no longer need to explain myself. I am not your emotional mirror. Your opinion of me is no longer relevant. This is where true self-worth emerges, not in fighting back, but in choosing not to descend into their chaos. It's not about revenge. It's about refusal. The refusal to engage in low-level energy. The refusal to defend your integrity to someone who already chose to disrespect it. And that's when they feel the shift, because silence reveals what words often conceal: strength, detachment, sovereignty. You're no longer playing the role they scripted for you, and without your participation, their manipulation collapses like a house of cards. A real-life example, the executive who walked away. Let me tell you about someone I know. A high-level executive who was betrayed by his closest business partner. Years of trust gone in a single backdoor deal. Everyone expected retaliation, lawsuits, explosions. Instead, he packed up his things, deleted all access, and disappeared quietly. No statement, no fight. 6 months later, the company that betrayed him was in free fall because the strength of the brand had always been his leadership. His vision, his silence wasn't just absence. It became a vacuum, a mirror, a consequence. That's Stoicism in motion. That's quiet power. Final reflection. If someone betrayed you, understand this. They didn't expect you to grow. They didn't expect you to rise. And they certainly didn't expect your silence to speak louder than their betrayal. But when you choose not to react, when you choose to protect your peace instead of your ego, you awaken a force they cannot combat: self-mastery, and it haunts them in the most poetic way, not because you punished them, but because you left no openings for their poison to enter again. Silence has a strange way of becoming a mirror. Not for you, but for the person who hurt you. When you stay calm, when you don't retaliate, when you simply walk away with dignity, the other person is left alone with their own actions. No distractions, no to hide behind. And in that space, the weight of their choices begins to settle. Not because you condemn them, but because your silence refused to soothe their guilt. This is where emotional intelligence flips the power dynamic. You're no longer reacting, you're revealing. By doing nothing, by choosing stillness over spectacle, you become the living embodiment of a truth they can no longer escape. Silence is a mirror of accountability. The manipulator, the betrayer, the saboteur, they depend on noise, not just from you, but from the world. Because if there's noise, they don't have to feel. If there's drama, they don't have to think. If there's chaos, they don't have to look in the mirror. But silence amplifies everything they tried to bury. The truth echoes louder in quiet spaces, and without your emotional distraction, their shame becomes inescapable. This is why people often lash out after you go silent. They're not angry at your absence. They're ashamed of what your absence reveals. Psychological projection in full collapse. Psychological projection is one of the most destructive tools manipulators rely on. They blame you for what they did. They twist your peace into arrogance, your distance into cruelty, your detachment into weakness. But here's what they never anticipate. When you stop feeding their narrative, when you stop explaining, apologizing, or justifying, their story begins to fall apart because their version of reality needs your participation to survive. When you go silent, you force them to sit in a room with a version of themselves they've spent their whole life avoiding. That's why your silence feels like punishment, because it ends the illusion. Real-life example, a daughter and a narcissistic parent. Consider this. A daughter grows up constantly blamed by her narcissistic parent. Every failure becomes her fault. Every argument her responsibility. She spends years trying to be understood, to fix things, to earn affection through emotional labor until one day she stops. No angry letters, no dramatic exits. She builds a life away from the dysfunction, starts healing, stops explaining. And what happens? The parent doesn't feel peace. They feel exposed, because now there's no one left to absorb their blame, no one left to carry their emotional weight. And for the first time, they are alone with the truth of themselves. That is the power of the silent mirror. Inner power and the discipline of non-reaction. It takes spiritual discipline not to respond when you've been wronged. The ego wants to fight. The pride wants revenge. The wounded heart wants to be heard. But true power, inner power, is in restraint. Not because you're afraid, not because you've given up, but because you know that any reaction would only water the weeds you're trying to outgrow. Every time you choose silence over chaos, you build quiet confidence. Not loud, not performative, just steady, rooted, unshakable. And that's what unravels those who betrayed you. Not your words, but your refusal to carry their darkness one step further. Reflection prompt. Have you ever watched someone unravel in your silence? Think about it. Have you ever stayed calm while someone tried to provoke you and they lost control? Not because you did anything, but because you didn't. That moment wasn't about dominance. It was about contrast. Your stillness highlighted the storm in them, and that contrast became unbearable. This is how Stoic power works. You don't crush people with aggression. You defeat manipulation with clarity. You dismantle dysfunction with your refusal to participate in it. Final thoughts. Silence is more than absence. It is confrontation without conflict. It is the reflection of who someone really is without your emotional presence to blur the image. And that's why it feels so unbearable to those who betrayed you, because the quiet truth, the one they tried to drown in noise, now stands in front of them unmoved, unbothered. You didn't need revenge. You just needed space. And in that space, karma found its voice. Detachment isn't weakness. It's war waged with wisdom. In the world of Stoicism, detachment is not about apathy or indifference. It's not the cold silence of someone who doesn't care. It's the grounded strength of someone who refuses to be enslaved by emotional chaos. It's a weapon of clarity forged in the fires of emotional intelligence and self-mastery. When someone betrays you, the impulse is to react, to prove your worth, to demand an apology, to correct the injustice. But the Stoic doesn't move like that. The Stoic doesn't react. They respond if necessary, and only when the response aligns with their values, not their emotions. Detachment equals emotional intelligence in motion. To detach doesn't mean you feel nothing. It means you choose not to be ruled by what you feel. That's emotional intelligence at its highest level. The ability to feel anger, sadness, grief, and betrayal, and still respond with integrity. A Stoic understands the more emotionally entangled you are with a manipulator, the more control they have over your internal state. But the moment you detach, truly detach, you reclaim that power. And when your inner world becomes off-limits to their games, you become unreadable unabi, unshakable. Detachment brings mental clarity. Emotional chaos clouds judgment. You overthink. You replay conversations. You doubt your decisions. But when you detach, clarity rushes in. You see patterns more clearly. You recognize manipulation tactics without falling for them. You begin to discern what's real from what's projection. That's why manipulators fear detachment, because it strips away their favorite weapon, confusion. You're no longer reacting to their drama. You're observing it, studying it. And once you can observe from a distance, you can make decisions that liberate you instead of decisions that come from hurt or pride. Example, the friend who always needed saving. Imagine this. You have a friend who constantly brings drama into your life. Every week there's a new crisis, a new enemy, a new person who wronged them. And you, the emotionally responsible one, feel compelled to help fix console until one day something shifts. You stop reacting. You don't reply to the panic texts. You don't jump in to rescue. You sit with yourself instead. And suddenly that friend's mask starts slipping. They don't want connection. They want control. They don't need support. They need an audience. Your silence. It's not abandonment. It's detachment. The beginning of mental clarity. And that clarity is what saves you from years of psychological exhaustion. Self-mastery is built in the pause. The Stoics taught us that the space between stimulus and response is where freedom lives. Anyone can react. Only the disciplined choose to pause. That pause, the moment where you take a deep breath and ask, is this worth my energy? Is where self-mastery begins. You're no longer a puppet yanked around by other people's behavior. You're the master of your mind. And your silence becomes your boundary. Psychological boundaries don't always need to be spoken. Sometimes they're felt in the lack of access, felt in the refusal to engage, felt in the calm energy you protect like sacred ground. Detachment doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care about yourself too. This is a hard truth for the people pleasers and empaths. Caring too much about people who harm you isn't compassion. It's self-abandonment. The Stoic doesn't harden their heart. They strengthen it. They don't isolate. They discriminate who gets access, and they don't detach out of spite. They detach out of respect for their energy, their sanity, and their sacred inner world. You can love someone deeply and still walk away. You can forgive someone silently and still never let them back in. That's not cold. That's clarity. Reflection. When did detachment save you? Ask yourself, when was the last time you didn't react? And it changed everything. That moment you said nothing, walked away and watched the storm collapse without your participation. That was your higher self speaking. That was detachment doing its job. That was you mastering your peace. Final thought: detachment is not the absence of love. It's the presence of wisdom. It's the refusal to be dragged into a war that has nothing to do with your growth. It's the armor of those who value peace more than validation. And in a world obsessed with noise, your quiet discernment becomes the most powerful statement of all. You didn't stop caring. You just stopped sacrificing yourself to prove it. There's a reason silence drives guilty people insane. It's not just that you're ignoring them. It's that you're forcing them to sit with the one thing they've spent their entire life running from themselves. When you go silent, you remove their favorite distraction. And suddenly, without your reactions, your justifications, your energy, they're left alone with their own reflection. And that mirror doesn't lie. Guilt needs a target. And you used to be it. People who betray, manipulate, or mistreat others rarely feel guilt in the moment. Why? Because they're too busy blaming you. That's psychological projection. They can't face the discomfort of admitting their behavior. So they twist the story. You made me do it. You were too sensitive. You overreacted. It's not truth. It's a coping mechanism. And for a long time it worked until you stopped explaining. The moment you went quiet, you shattered their illusion. There's no one left to blame. Just them and the weight of what they did. Your silence is their sentence. Silence doesn't just punish, it exposes. It forces the other person to confront the wreckage they caused without a scapegoat. And for someone who built their whole ego on being right, that's unbearable. You're not even fighting. You're not arguing. You're not throwing insults. You're just gone. And that absence, that void where your energy used to be, it haunts them because now they don't just hear their own thoughts. They feel your absence as proof that they were the problem all along. Real-life moment when silence spoke louder than revenge. A woman once shared this story. Her ex-boyfriend cheated, lied, and when court tried to flip the blame, said she was cold, said she was never enough. She said nothing, just packed her things and walked away. Months later, he reached out, not to apologize, but to explain. She didn't respond. A year after that, another message, this time full of nostalgia. Regret. On Putri again. She stayed silent. And today he watches her life through social media, Never getting a reply, never hearing her voice again. Her silence became his life sentence. Guilt unleashed. Looks like anger. Here's a psychological truth. When someone feels guilty and doesn't know how to process it, it often shows up as rage. They lash out. They mock your silence. They accuse you of being toxic, selfish, orbit. But that's not about you. That's their guilt. Suffocating and looking for oxygen in your reactions. And when you don't react, that guilt has nowhere to go and it begins to eat them from the inside. That's the justice no court can serve. It's spiritual discipline in action. It's the slow unraveling of someone who thought they could escape consequence. Quiet confidence breaks psychological control. You don't need revenge. You don't need to be heard. You don't need their apology. You just need to stay silent and move forward. This isn't passive. It's active detachment. It's what high-performance people do when they outgrow emotional entanglement. You're no longer available for chaos. You're busy building peace, and the more you glow without them, the more their guilt grows within them. This is the secret many never learn. True power isn't expressed through confrontation. It's revealed through stillness and the unshakable clarity of someone who no longer needs closure. Reflection. What did your silence reveal? Think back when you stopped defending yourself. What truth surfaced? When you stopped chasing answers, what clarity came rushing in? Maybe you discovered your self-worth. Maybe you found your inner peace. Or maybe they finally showed who they really were once they couldn't control you anymore. Either way, your silence wasn't just an act. It was a mirror. And in that mirror, they finally saw what you saw all along. Final thought. The guilty thrive on your reaction, not because it helps them, but because it numbs them. And when you take that away, they're forced to meet themselves. Unfiltered, unjustified, undistracted. And for many, that's the one battle they can't win. You didn't destroy them. You simply stopped protecting them from their own reflection. They thought silence would be the end of the conversation. What they never expected was that silence would become a mirror, and every cruel word they once spoke would come back to haunt them in echoes. You see, when you're no longer there to interrupt their mind with your voice, all that's left is theirs. And in that silence, the things they said begin to echo louder than they ever anticipated. The brain remembers what the conscience denies. Human memory doesn't forget emotional pain, especially the pain we've caused others. We may bury it, we may suppress it, but the moment silence enters and no more noise exists to cover it up, it resurfaces. Those who betrayed you, they now walk through their days with whispers in their own head. Why did I say that? Why didn't I stop? Why did they go so quiet? It's not your absence that destroys them. It's what your absence makes them remember. This is emotional intelligence at work, not just in how you manage your pain, but in how you weaponize restraint without even trying. Your exit becomes their inner collapse. There's something deeply psychological that happens when a person loses access to the one they once belittled, controlled, or underestimated. At first they act like it doesn't matter. They laugh. They move on. They pretend nothing happened. But then the silence lingers. They start to remember things you didn't even notice you forgave. The snide comments, the moments they ignored you, the way they looked away when you needed them most. Suddenly, all the little moments they dismissed come roaring back this time, without your presence to soften the blow. That's how inner peace becomes your silent revenge. Quiet confidence shakes their illusion. When you used to defend yourself, cry, or beg for understanding, they felt powerful. But now you're calm. Now you're focused. Now you walk in quiet confidence and no longer feed the narrative. That change alone dismantles the illusion they built that you were weak, that you needed them, that they were right. And the more you grow in silence, the more they shrink in their own reflection. This is self-worth in motion, not defined by validation but by detachment, real life. Example, the echo that destroys. A man once bragged about how he broke her spirit. Said she cried too much, said she was too emotional. Eventually, she stopped responding. She blocked his number, moved cities, vanished from his world. Years later, he confessed to a friend that he still hears her sobs at night. Not because she still cries, but because he never made peace with what he did. She never raised her voice again. But in his mind, her silence plays back everything he said over and over, until it's no longer just a memory. It's his own voice turning against him. They thought you were the problem. Now they're left with themselves. Here's what's ironic. They spent so much time convincing others and themselves that you were the issue. But when you disappeared, the problem went with you. And yet their life didn't get better. The peace they imagined never came. The noise inside their mind got worse. Why? because they remove the symptom, but never face the cause, their own dysfunction. And that is the curse of the manipulator. They only realize your value once your silence exposes their damage. Reflection prompt. What echo did they leave you with? Let's pause. Think about the last time someone hurt you deeply. Not just a mistake, but a pattern, a betrayal, a character flaw. What did they say to you that still rings in your mind? Now flip it. What silence did you leave them with? Because if you walked away with emotional intelligence, self-worth, and dignity, then that silence didn't just echo in their ears. It echoed in their conscience. And that's the one place they can't run from. Final takeaway, you didn't have to scream. You didn't need revenge. You simply walked away and let time, truth, and trauma speak in your place. And now they're trapped in a conversation they thought they ended. Except this time, they're the only one talking and they can't bear what they're hearing. They post pictures with new people. They laugh in videos. They act unbothered, like nothing ever happened. Like you were just a passing phase, easily replaced. But what you're seeing is surface performance. And what they're hiding is a storm. Because just as your silence matured into peace, theirs evolved into psychological unrest. They're not happy. They're performing happiness. People often confuse external noise with internal healing. But look closer. The sudden oversharing. The need to broadcast their glow-up. The constant validation from strangers. That's not confidence. That's panic. That's a desperate attempt to fill the silence you left behind. Because deep down they know you're no longer watching. And it kills them that you're not looking back. Cognitive dissonance, the battle inside. Here's the truth. Most manipulators never see coming. The same person they discarded is now the standard they can't escape. Every new connection gets compared to you. But without your emotional intelligence, your depth, your quiet strength, they all fall short. This creates a cognitive dissonance. A war between the story they tell the world and the emptiness they feel within. Their life may look fine, but the silence echoes in their gut. They traded peace for applause. You didn't need to prove your healing. You just lived it. But they traded inner peace for external validation, a game that never ends. They tell themselves they're winning, but it only takes one quiet moment. One night alone, one scent, one memory, and the illusion shatters. Because peace isn't found in being seen, it's found in being still. And that's what they no longer know how to do. Real-life moment. The fake smile that cracked. One woman shared her story. Her ex betrayed her, then flaunted a new relationship online just days later. Everyone thought he'd moved on. But months later he messaged her at 2:13 a.m. Not to apologize, not to ask her back, but to say, I don't know why, but I can't sleep. You were always so calm. How did you do that? That's what happens when they realize peace was never in who they're with. It was in who they used to have. Stoic truth. What you see isn't always real. The Stoics taught us appearances are deceptive. Only the soul tells the truth. So don't be fooled by the illusion of their happiness. The people who hurt you may look successful. They may laugh louder, post more, seem fine. But the deeper question is, do they sleep in peace? Because your high-performance mindset isn't just about hustle. It's about alignment. It's about having nothing to prove. And no war within. That's the kind of wealth they can't counterfeit. Reflection. Prompt. Whose peace are you chasing? Pause. And ask yourself, are you trying to win by looking happy, or are you actually cultivating peace? Are you still tracking their moves, or have you reclaimed your own stillness? Because once you master your emotional intelligence, you stop performing and start living. Final takeaway, their world may look fine, but their spirit knows what it lost. They didn't just lose a relationship. They lost someone whose presence brought calm, depth, and meaning. And no matter how much they distract themselves, there's no substitute for a soul that's at peace. So let them chase noise. Let them post and pretend. You keep choosing quiet strength, spiritual discipline, and unshakable self-worth, because that's the kind of revenge they'll never understand and never stop feeling. You didn't curse them. You didn't expose them. You didn't even respond. You just disappeared gracefully. And now, without saying a single word, you've become their loudest consequence. Because when someone betrays you, they expect one of two reactions: rage or begging. But silence, that's terrifying. That's power they can't predict or control. Your absence feels like judgment. You see, when you're present, they can still manipulate, distract, or distort your perception. But when you're gone, you're no longer a participant in their narrative. You become a mirror they can't turn away from. Every success you build in silence, every day you don't react, it all piles onto their conscience like an invisible weight. And slowly, without warning, the guilt starts to rot from the inside. Emotional intelligence triggers their inner collapse. Here's the paradox. The calmer you become, the louder their thoughts scream. Your emotional intelligence, your refusal to play the victim or the aggressor, it removes their excuses. They can't say you were crazy. They can't say you chased them. They can't say you begged. All they're left with is themselves. And for people who betrayed you, being left alone with their own reflection is a punishment they never prepared for. The universe doesn't miss. They thought walking away from you was freedom, but what they actually walked into was silence and the spiritual consequences that follow. Because karma doesn't show up loud. It shows up as restlessness in the middle of the night. The inability to trust new people, that knowing feeling that something is missing but they can't name it. That something was you, your integrity, your emotional depth, your presence, and now every new connection feels hollow by comparison. Real-life example. I didn't realize what I had. One man left his wife for a more exciting partner. 6 months later, the new relationship was in flames. He reached out with one sentence. I didn't realize how peaceful my life was until I lost it. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. There's something terrifying about a door that closes and never opens again, not because you hate them, but because you outgrew the need to explain your worth to people who never valued it. And that's where spiritual discipline meets emotional liberation. You stop reacting. You stop explaining. You just move on fully, completely silently. That's when they realize you're not just gone from their life. You're gone from their future. Stoic principle indifference is the strongest. Reply: the Stoics didn't seek revenge. They sought inner control. The best revenge, Marcus Aurelius said, is to be unlike him who did the injury. Your absence is not spite. It's wisdom. It says, I don't need you to suffer. I just need distance to thrive. And that subtle detachment hurts them more than anger ever could. Final reflection. If you've ever questioned whether they feel your absence, they do. They just won't admit it. Because to admit it would mean confessing they lost something priceless. And the human ego rarely allows that. But their restlessness, their overposting, their short temper, all signs. Not that they miss you, but that they can't replace you. So don't chase, don't explain, don't look back. Your absence is your answer. And it's the kind they'll carry quietly for the rest of their lives. You didn't haunt them with threats. You didn't chase them with apologies. You didn't play games to win them back. Yet somehow they still see you everywhere. And not because they're obsessed with you, but because their conscience never forgot you. Emotional memory doesn't fade, it repeats. When someone betrays a person of integrity, it doesn't just go away. The memory replays in the quiet moments, in the dark nights, in the stillness between fake smiles. A certain song, a scent on someone else, a place you once stood beside them. These aren't triggers. They're reminders that they lost something real. And the human psyche doesn't process that easily. Not when the one they betrayed was the most emotionally intelligent presence they ever knew. They try to replace, not reflect. Most people who hurt you won't self-reflect. They'll distract. They'll jump into a new relationship, chase new highs, post curated smiles. But here's what no one sees. At 2 a.m., when the noise fades and dopamine drops, your memory returns. Because truth always echoes when the lies get quiet. And your calmness, your depth, your inner peace isn't something they can recreate with someone shallow. They'll touch new hands, hear new voices, but emotionally they're chasing a shadow yours. You became their internal mirror. What they fear now isn't you. It's the version of themselves they saw reflected through you. You held up a mirror, one that revealed their emotional immaturity, one that reminded them of the love they were never taught to receive, one that showed them how far they were from peace. And after losing you, that mirror didn't disappear. It became internal. Now every time they meet someone emotionally stable, they feel exposed. Every time someone sets a boundary, they're reminded of how they shattered yours. You became the standard they can't live up to, and that realization is inescapable, a real-life parallel. Her absence spoke louder than my ego could handle. A man once wrote online, I thought I was unbothered until the silence got louder than her presence ever did. He said he used to mock her calmness, call her too soft, too distant. But after she left without a single insult, he couldn't stop hearing her voice in his own decisions. Would she tolerate this? Would she settle for that? She wasn't there, but her presence was still shaping his standards. That's not obsession. That's reverberation, Stoic power becoming unforgettable without forcing it. The Stoics taught that the highest form of strength isn't to dominate others. It's to live in such alignment with virtue that your absence exposes their flaws. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Marcus Aurelius. When you embody truth, clarity, emotional resilience, you don't have to fight for closure. Your character becomes the closure. Your absence becomes the teacher. Your silence becomes the sentence. And in that stillness, they feel the full weight of their mistake over and over again. Final insight. You didn't aim to be unforgettable. You just showed up as your most authentic self, calm, clear, whole. But when someone loses a soul that anchored them, there's no forgetting that they can run cities away. They can block you, mock you, replace you, but they can't outrun the echo of the peace you once brought them, because no chaos ever feels like home again. When someone betrays a soul that was calm, kind, and sincere, they don't just hurt a person, they disturb a spiritual balance, and that disturbance always demands correction. Energy doesn't lie. You can fake smiles. You can pretend nothing happened. You can rewrite the story to make yourself look innocent, but the energy you leave behind, that never lies. When you violate someone who loved you with depth, you don't just damage the relationship, you corrupt your own spiritual integrity. And that rupture, it follows you. It doesn't care how you justify the betrayal. It follows the truth, not your narrative. Stoicism meets spiritual law. The Stoics weren't religious, but they were deeply aware of unseen forces. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What injures the hive injures the bee." Meaning, when you harm others, you indirectly harm yourself. When you betray someone's peace, you poison your own. Every act of cruelty fractures your alignment with reason, and eventually you feel the psychological weight of your own disconnection. What goes around comes around, but not how you expect. People misunderstand karma. It's not always punishment. It's pattern recognition. Betray someone kind. You'll be haunted by their absence in your future relationships. Mock someone's silence. You'll find your words falling flat when you need connection most. Destroy someone's trust. You'll live with a mind that can't trust itself. That's karma. It doesn't yell. It reflects. It doesn't chase. It unfolds in your patterns, in your loneliness, in the way peace starts slipping through your fingers while you're still smiling in public. Real-life parallel she left in silence, but her absence took the light with her. A man once admitted when she left, "I thought I was free. I thought I won. But months later, I realized my entire life got darker, not louder, just darker." He didn't lose a lover. He lost a light, and in that loss, he found himself surrounded by people who couldn't see him, understand him, or reach him. That's what betrayal does. It doesn't just push someone away. It closes the door to your own evolution. Because once you betray someone who brought spiritual grounding into your life, you also betray the version of yourself you could have become through that connection. You were a gift, not a lesson. Sometimes people say you were just a lesson. No, you were a gift, but they handled you so carelessly. You became a lesson, a brutal one, a necessary one, a lesson delivered by silence and karma. And now they walk the earth thinking they lost a person when in truth, they lost the very energy that anchored their sanity. That's not revenge. That's natural consequence. The guilt they can't outrun, even if they never admit it. There's a version of them that knows you were solid. You were rare. You were peaceful in a world of noise. And when they betrayed that, they broke something within themselves they can't fix externally. No new relationship nor distraction, no fake spiritual awakening can substitute the quiet regret they carry. It's not loud. It's subtle, but it shadows everything. Final reflection. You don't need to seek revenge. You don't need to correct the narrative. The moment they betrayed you, they betrayed their own alignment with truth. And truth has a long memory. Let your silence speak. Let their patterns reveal the consequence. Because while they try to rebuild with cracked tools, you're already rising quietly, powerfully, with spiritual discipline and peace they can no longer reach. Silence is often mistaken for weakness, but in truth it's the final form of strength, because when you say nothing, you do something most people can't. You rise above the need to be understood. Emotional intelligence is knowing what deserves your energy. The emotionally reactive are always loud. They explain, they defend, they fight for clarity from people who feed on confusion. But the emotionally intelligent, they understand that most battles aren't worth the breath. They know the moment you explain yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you, you've already lost energy, and energy is your most expensive currency. So they save it for healing, for growth, for building a future that no longer includes people who devalue them. That's the silent win. The most powerful statements are made without words. You want to shake them, make them understand what they did, expose the lies, defend your heart, reclaim your name. But here's the truth. The most cutting thing you can ever say is nothing. Because silence it removes distractions, it reveals their reflection, and for manipulators it's a mirror they can't control. Your silence removes their ability to twist your truth. It leaves them in a room alone with the consequences they hoped you'd carry. That's power. When you don't react, you control the outcome. Most people give away their power the moment they react. But when you stay grounded, you send a message. You no longer have access to my peace. And that message is devastating because it tells them they're no longer relevant to your emotional world. That's the real punishment. Not screaming, not vengeance, but complete and total detachment. Stoicism calm is the ultimate flex. The ancient Stoics taught that true mastery lies in what you don't do. Don't beg. Don't chase. Don't explain. Instead, you observe. You attack. You transcend. In a world that rewards reaction, calmness becomes rebellion. And when you stop responding to chaos, Chao loses his interest. That's the silent collapse. Not because you fought, but because you didn't. You win. When you no longer need closure, people betray you and then leave behind a hole hoping you'll fall into it. They want you to seek closure because it gives them more airtime in your mind. But when you go silent, you build your own closure. And that's the ultimate freedom because closure doesn't come from their apology. It comes from your clarity. You no longer need them to make things right because you've already made yourself whole. Real-life parallel. It didn't block him. I just outgrew him. A woman once shared, I didn't yell. I didn't send a final message. I didn't block him. I just outgrew the need to be heard by someone who never listened. That's it. That's emotional evolution. And the irony, the moment she went silent, he started noticing everything. The way she no longer smiled. The absence of her voice, the energy shift. But it was too late because her silence wasn't revenge. It was her rebirth. You're not the same. Any more silence doesn't mean you're broken. It means you've become unavailable to what once broke you. You've redefined power, not as control, not as dominance, but as the quiet refusal to shrink for anyone's comfort. You've learned that walking away without a sound echoes louder than any scream. You didn't win because they hurt. You won because you didn't need to hurt back. And that's the kind of victory only the healed ever experience. So if they're wondering why you no longer explain yourself, why you stopped responding, why your presence became absence, it's not bitterness. It's not revenge. It's evolution. Because the loudest response isn't a scream. It's alive, so elevated, so peaceful, so untouchable that their chaos no longer reaches it. That's the silence that destroys them, not out of cruelty, but because they realize they no longer matter to someone they once had full access to. And by the time they understand that, you're already gone. Gone to better days, better people, a better version of yourself. Let this video be your mirror. If you've been silently healing, if you've walked away without closure, if your quiet has cost you relationships but earned you freedom, know this: you didn't lose them. They lost the version of you they'll never meet again, and that is your victory. We want to hear from you. Was there a moment in your life where silence became your turning point? A time you stopped defending yourself and started building yourself? Share it in the comments. Your story might be the spark someone else needs today. Don't forget to subscribe to the Stoic Tide for daily wisdom, strength, and clarity. Smash the like button if this message spoke to your soul. Share this with someone who's choosing peace over noise. Your silence isn't weakness. It's a boundary. It's healing, it's power. And here at Think Stoic 101, we don't just survive betrayal, we transcend it. See you in the next video. Until then, stay grounded, stay powerful, and let silence do the speaking.